Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's AEC Senior Executive Briefing. My name is Greg Hart of PSMJ. Thrilled to have along with me here today my colleague Christina Seibert of our in-house training group here at PSMJ. Before we get started, the first thing I want to do is extend a very special welcome and thank you to all of our veterans who are with us here today on this Veterans Day here in the United States. Thank you for your service. And if you have any veterans in your office, feel free to give them a little shout out or props in the chat function there as we go through the broadcast today, but certainly want to recognize you folks and for your sacrifice. Okay, so we have a lot to cover today. As you probably saw in the announcements for this broadcast, today is all about project management. But more than just project management, we wanted to share some actual case studies and examples of some pretty robust improvement in financial performance as a result of some of the things that these firms are doing with respect to project management. We know that project management is the only way that firms can actually generate revenue. A whole bunch of ways to spend it, but you only generate it through projects. So we got a great discussion there. Before we get started, if you have any questions for any of our speakers here today, you can enter those into the Q&A panel on your screen. We'll get to as many questions as we can during the broadcast. If you registered for the broadcast today, you'll be receiving an email from us within 24 hours with a link to the recording, so you can watch and rewatch and share till your heart's content, and also share some other important information in that email as well. If you have any questions or don't get it, you can always email us at customerservice@psmj.com. With that, I want to welcome back to the stage here Dave Burstein of PSMJ. Dave's going to kick things off with some interesting data and insight that he's gathered recently on the impact of COVID and kind of what's going on with respect to project and financial performance. So Dave, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here. Looking forward to this. Boy, we got a lot of interest in this topic, so I'm really excited to be able to discuss it.
Yeah. All right.
So let me start off by just sharing a little bit of data with you and putting into perspective where we are as an industry in terms of project management. So let me start with the market. And we recently did a comparison between all the major A&E markets in this quarter, this year versus the same quarter, Q3 of last year. Last year, you can see it on this graph. Last year, the results were in the red circles, and this year they're in the yellow circles. Without getting into the details of this graph, anything left of zero in the minus means that people were seeing deteriorating proposal opportunities. And you can see back a year ago, there were a number of red dots in negative territory and some that were pretty neutral. Well, those have all gone away. Every single yellow dot is now in positive territory, which means for the first time in a long time, every single major market, people are seeing more proposal opportunities quarter over quarter than they were before. So the market looks really, really good. However, there is a rub. And that is, it's great to have a good market. It's great to get lots of proposal opportunities, but you can't actually perform that work unless you have the people. And that's changing too. This is the job openings as a percentage, the y-axis is a percentage of the total workforce. So you can see that in our industry category, business and professional services is the category that A&E firms are in. And you can see that we are at a historic high. We have never been even close to this many job openings. Firms are overall averaging about 8% of their total workforce in job openings. So if you can't find people, how do you increase profit? So one way is to improve project management and turn what we call net revenue deficit into a net revenue surplus. And when we talk about net revenue deficit, that's the difference between the target multiplier and the achieved multiplier from your firm. And you can see all these little bars here on this bar chart. These are the kinds of things that tend to happen that prevent you from achieving the multiplier that you targeted. And small differences in net revenue deficit can have a huge, huge impact. You can see we just took a typical average 100-person firm And you can see just a 0.1 improvement in net revenue deficit generates $450,000 of additional profit. And in order to make $450,000 the old-fashioned way by hiring people and doing more work, look at all these different things that you have to do. So I'm not going to say that it's easy to improve your project performance to get that 0.1 improvement, but it's a whole lot easier than doing those other things, especially in today's market. If we look historically, it's kind of an interesting trend. What we saw back in the early 1980s was a huge gap between the median target multiplier in the industry and the median achieved multiplier. You could see that gap was enormous. Well, so that gap over the years has really shrunk. And in fact, by 2019, the median firm in our industry went from having a net revenue deficit to having a net revenue surplus. I think it's a function of primarily two things. One is firms are paying a lot more attention to project management training and development than they used to. And the second, project management software is a whole lot better than it used to be. So combination of those things, maybe some others, big improvement. And then the pandemic hit. And if you look at the difference between 2019 and 2020, that positive trend really went into reverse. And you can see that the median firm went from a 0.9% of revenue surplus to a minus 1% of revenue deficit. And even the upper and lower quartiles all deteriorated. But even so, the upper quartile, the top 25% of performing firms still achieved a significant net revenue surplus. And that's really what we want to talk about today is how do you turn that net revenue deficit into a surplus? We have a couple of really great guests here today, both of whom I've had the pleasure of working with for a number of years. So I'm going to turn this back over to Christina. And Christina, I will let you introduce our guests and bring them on.
Thanks, Dave. So joining us today, we have Jim Hudgens, who's the president of THW Design, an 80-person architecture, land planning, and interior design firm based in Atlanta, Georgia. Established in 1957, THW Design has grown to become one of the leading senior living design firms in the nation, and Jim has risen through the ranks of the firm, first joining as an associate in 1983. Art Hoffman is the Chief Administrative Officer and a member of the Board of Directors at Gannett Fleming, a global planning, design, technology, and construction management firm with more than 60 offices and 2,700 employees in the US, Canada, and the Middle East. In his role with the firm, Art is responsible for human resources, legal services, IT services, safety, and property management. Art is a registered professional engineer and a board-certified geotechnical engineer.
So you can see from their backgrounds that we really have two very diverse guests, one from a very large engineering firm, one from a significantly smaller architecture firm. And we did that intentionally to give you some good perspective, regardless of your firm size, as to how some of these techniques might help you.
Good afternoon. Things off.
Yeah. Why don't we, we'll kind of jump into the discussion here and see where we go.
Yeah. First up is tell us about what started you on your journey to improve project performance.
Jim? Jim, you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we probably started this process, I was telling Dave earlier, it was at least 20 years ago. And we were a much different firm then. We were probably a third the size we are now. We might have been somewhere in the 30-person range, 25 to 30-person range. We had no really formal training for our project managers. It was not a high priority. We had project managers that came from different backgrounds, different skill sets. And so they each really kind of had their own methodology for managing projects. And even though we had some crude reporting systems at the time that gave us a little bit of consistency, it really wasn't creating the kind of consistency that we were hoping to get, just simply because as people would move through different project teams and work with different managers, everything would be different. There would be no consistency in the kind of information that they were getting. So we made the decision to participate with PSMJ in their boot camp process, and we sent a number of people there to kind of get that exposure and learned a lot of new concepts, a lot of new tools that we had never seen before that really kind of changed the culture of our firm. And that was really something that has stayed with us. And even though that process has morphed over the years and we've added new tools and we've changed kind of the methodology because we've had to, we've got about 3 times the size that we were back then. And obviously a very significant cultural shift for us. At that time, we didn't really have a lot of consistent processes and mentality about it. So we really had to change our culture. And that was a very difficult process for a lot of us. That was, back when I was doing project management, and it was very new to me. And even though a lot of that was very intuitive, we really just didn't have the tools and the processes to really be able to communicate that information well to our project teams and our staff. So it's made a big difference in what we've been doing and the approach that we take to project management.
Art, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. A lot of the very same thoughts about consistency of project management as far as Gannett Fleming is concerned as well. As all of our firms, we generate our revenue and profits basically executing projects for our clients. And, of course, success in that is more than just financial performance. We've got quality goals and client satisfaction goals and risk management goals, and of course, project performance, financial performance goals. And, all those types of success, all those measurements of success with regard to projects are really in the hands of our project managers, right? If we're going to increase the probability that our projects are successful across all those metrics, we really need to make sure that we have the most competent, capable project managers possible who have the best chance of satisfying our clients and meeting all those goals. And so it was in 2012 that we decided we needed to embark upon a new approach to project management. Several years earlier, we had we worked with Penn State University and put together a formal project management training program, which we ran across the whole company, and that was good, but it was clearly time for a refresh. And I was charged with determining how we were going to do that, either develop a program in-house or find something that was available to bring in-house. And so at that time, I looked around and I saw the PSMJ project management boot camps and made the decision to work with PSMG and Dave. And that's when we met Dave, I think it was about that time frame. And we've been working together closely ever since. And we've been running a program at Gannett Fleming since then. We call it our Project Management Academy. And it's about 37 hours of content. David brings the 40 plus years of industry best practice experience that he can share with us. We have our own in-house people who share their experience and put that all together to create this program. And to this point, we've put about 560 people through that program. But it was all about trying to do the best we could to help our project managers be the best managers in the industry.
Great. All right.
Next up, what goals did you set when you began investing in project performance improvement?
Well, I'll start. Our initial goals were pretty simple, and our goals over the years have evolved as our firm has evolved. But initially, it was really just about wanting to set some expectations for our project managers and projects teams regarding how we would begin to monitor project performance with a monthly reporting process. It was very foreign to us at that time. We didn't, as I said earlier, we didn't have any consistency in the process or the tools. So it was really about beginning to set those expectations for project managers and our project teams. We started asking our project managers to set up some consistent formats in terms of setting up what we called then team contracts. We would put all the financials together, that would identify how all the resources would be distributed across across the team and across the project in general. And we tried to set up some metrics, not just in terms of profitability and utilization and so forth, but we were also trying to determine, because we have different types of projects, and those projects have different types of goals individually. And we actually started setting them up in terms of kind of an A, B, and C category, where an A project was going to be something where we had extraordinary expectations from a design standpoint. It was an opportunity to do something really innovative. We had perhaps higher fees to be able to kind of stimulate that innovation, versus a B or a C project that maybe it was something where the expectations were less, either in terms of had a lower budget, or from a design expectation that perhaps had lesser expectations. So we started trying to establish those kinds of categories to be able to set some benchmark performance metrics for each of those, to kind of control the project momentum and the hours that were being spent on projects by the design team. And that started to help a lot as well. And I think certainly as we started to introduce new team members, excuse me, looks like the video went off there. As we started to introduce new team members into the process, we started also integrating a project delivery metric as well. And that was really more in terms of the quality of the project and the quality of the documentation that was being delivered, because we suffered some quality issues for a period of time, because we didn't have a lot of QC effort at the time. We have strengthened that significantly over the course of the last 10 years or so, and created a whole career track for a group of people within that category. So we monitor not just the financial performance of it, but we also monitor the quality performance, and we set some metrics with that as well. And we think the combination is really what helps us to deliver a successful project.
Yeah. Hey, Art, before you answer that, just a tactical question that came in here. Back up a little bit on the PM Academy. The question is, have the 560 people gone through all 37 hours of the content, or they go to different tracks, or maybe just explain that a little bit?
All 37 hours. So it's a program we run at least once a year. Most years twice, maybe once or twice a year since 2012. All 560 have gone through all 37 and a half hours. And, it changes year to year, right? So it's 37 and a half hours now. Maybe in 2012, it was 30 hours. I can't remember. But it was essentially the same. And so we've been running it ever since.
So everybody went through all of them.
Everybody went through all of them. This particular year, 2021, we actually ran 5 classes. It was all virtual. That was another thing that happened along the way. We went from all face-to-face, live to virtual, and that made quite a difference. You can put a lot more people through it in any given time. But yep, all of them.
And then just another quick question for Art, and then we'll go back to Jim as well. We're getting a lot of questions coming in here, which I kind of had a feeling was going to be the case. What are the biggest findings, or what were the biggest gaps that you found when you rolled out the program? Maybe Art first and then Jim.
What were the biggest gaps that we found when we rolled out the program? I think there were, I'll put it maybe a different way. I think we increased through this program a focus on project planning. Every project gets a project execution plan. That was not the case before we started this program. As Jim was talking about consistency, of course, as I mentioned, we did do project management training in the past, and some project managers were, continuing the good practice of preparing plans at the beginning of every project. We became much more serious about that when we initiated the Project Management Academy. So every project gets a project execution plan, and that process has improved over the years to make it easier and more valuable. Another thing that we weren't doing before we began this program was project reviews. Some of us did. When I managed our Pittsburgh office, I brought my project managers in once a month to talk about the status of their projects. But that was because I chose to do it. Again, consistency across the board with principals, working with project managers to check on the status of their project on an ongoing basis. So I think if I had to pick two, initiating a requirement for project execution plans and also initiating a requirement for periodic project principal reviews are probably the two biggest things that we weren't doing before that we do now. And I think they were really important.
Jim, how about you? You touched on this a little bit in your remarks earlier, but the biggest findings and the biggest gaps when you started to kind of double down on project management.
Yeah, I think in terms of gaps, what we saw there were gaps in understanding just from the variety of project managers and the project teams that we had. And trying to bring that consistency became difficult. Art mentioned the project reviews. We started that a long time ago, and that process has morphed a lot over the years in terms of who participates in it, what kind of metrics we set, how we set it, how we communicate it. But we started doing the project reviews, and that allowed us to develop some of that consistency in terms of the way we communicate our expectations and how we set those expectations. What was difficult about that is we were doing that with one project manager at a time. So we would bring in a project manager or what we now have as a studio director and going through a list of projects for each project manager or each studio director and then cycling it through. But every project manager still started to have some inconsistent methodologies in terms of how they were using the tools and so forth. And then we started doing a studio directors meeting, and we have those once a week now. And we start talking about all the various issues that all of the project managers are dealing with, whether it's a financial issue or a staffing issue or whatever it may be. And that allows our project studio directors to have consistent communication with each other. So they can hear about the issues that they're dealing with, whether it's a project issue, it's a financial issue, a fee issue. It helps us communicate expectations a little bit better. It helps us establish some consistent benchmarks because, our roster of project managers changes over time. So, we bring in a couple of new people and suddenly we've got to, bring somebody else up to that same level of understanding. And it takes constant communication to be able to do that. So that was probably the one thing that we changed, significantly was just the type of people that we were including in the project reviews and the other meetings that we were kind of putting around that project review meeting to help support that information a little bit better.
Sure. Another question, Art, you touched on quality a little bit ago. Somebody asked, what are the metrics that you use to measure quality?
What are the metrics that we use to measure quality? Well, I can tell you, let me back up a little bit. One of the things that I plan to mention today is the fact that Gannett Fleming is a 106-year-old company this year, I think. And we have had a long history of providing high quality service, and quality is really a fundamental part of Gannett Fleming's culture. And we in 1993, we had an excellent quality management system, but we introduced a total quality management approach back then, and we created a quality policy at the time. And that quality policy is exactly the same today as it was in 1993. And it's to provide professional services, meeting the requirements of clients, involving all personnel, and continually improving work processes. And we set up quality objectives at the time, which have changed over the course of time. But those quality objectives have to do with employee engagement, customer satisfaction scores. We are ISO 9001 certified, our quality management system is, I should say. And as such, we go through internal quality audits every year, as well as external quality audits by our register to maintain that certification. And, so we have quality objectives that are wrapped around our achievement in those audits, right? Not having findings in the audits, repeat findings especially. And also closing projects on budget is one of our quality objectives. So, we have 5 quality objectives: to get an employee survey scores regarding quality above 4.3 out of 5, having customer satisfaction evaluation scores exceeding 4.7 out of 5, no nonconformances from customer satisfaction evaluations, meaning a negative comment from a client or a low score on the assessment form that we send to them and ask them to fill out. No repeat findings between audits at any location, and then closing our projects with less than 1% and less than $5,000 of negative labor variance. So, those are our very specific quality objectives and quality goals. And just a little bit more on that, the thing I think that has helped us is the fact that we are so focused on quality again at Fleming, and our quality management system actually describes our project execution process. They are linked together. And through this process of auditing to verify that our project managers and others understand and are applying the quality management system and our project execution process, so internal audits, these, as I mentioned before, the principal project reviews, again, talking to project managers about how their projects are going. And we also, some of our directors, our senior executives have begun deciding to do their own project reviews. So we've got focus and attention being paid to how we're executing our projects from at least 3 different directions. And we do have measurable quality objectives and goals.
Okay. Jim, you have anything to add to that as far as defining quality?
Yeah, it's been a big issue for us over the last 15 years or so, trying to establish a more of a system and more of a methodology for being able to measure that. And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we did, I mean, if I look back 25 years ago, our quality control system was, we had a guy with gray hair who sat in the corner of the office and checked drawings. I mean, that was kind of the extent of our quality control system. And that worked fine when we were doing small projects and we, were a relatively small firm, but we've had to grow that rather significantly over the last 15, 20 years. And we brought in somebody and have given that person a position of leadership in the company as a QA/QC director. That person has a staff underneath them that's in charge of helping us to monitor the progress of the drawings. We have monthly reviews of drawings. We have drawings by phase that get reviewed. We've also instituted a peer review process. We actually send our drawings out to other architects and other engineers to have them reviewed, which has helped significantly in terms of being able to catch those things. We can tell when quality slips or when quality improves just by looking at the number of change orders or the number of E&O issues that come up at the end of a project. We've been able to significantly reduce that. And we monitor those, and that becomes part of our project review process. We look, particularly when we have projects that are in construction administration, we have a log that tracks all the change orders and where the change order occurred and who was responsible for the change order. And we sit and we look at those and we create benchmarks that we try to stay within in terms of what the magnitude of those change orders are. So that's part of the way that we measure quality. We also brought in a director of technology who kind of manages our BIM and Revit systems, but he's also responsible for creating tools for our project teams to be able to put things together quicker and with a better eye on quality, creating families of libraries for the kinds of things that we do over and over again, so we're not having to reinvent the wheel each time, particularly as we bring new people in. Everybody has their own special way of doing things sometimes, but we've created a much more rigid set of standards within our company to be able to manage the quality of the documents that's going out. So it's something we have to constantly monitor, and it's one of the things that we always feel like we can do better on. But I think we've really come a long way in our ability to be able to do that over the last 10 years, just as part of this, project management system.
Good. I think, Christine, that's a perfect. Oh, I'm sorry, Art, go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. Listening to Jim, one of the things that we initiated, I mentioned 1993, a long time ago, were small group quality, quality teams wrapped around the groups that were actually creating the work. So the bridge unit in the Pittsburgh office had a quality improvement team. And that's true throughout the company. And they still work that way. And we created a corporate quality improvement team, which at the time was the board of directors. It's a bigger group now. It's our senior directors. But that group, we call it the CQUIT. The CQUIT has been meeting continuously on a monthly basis since 1993. And I was corporate quality officer for many years. And I think the whole time I was quality officer, we may have missed 2 or 3 of those meetings. And it's a real high level commitment to quality. And the meetings are run by the corporate quality officer. And again, to the idea of how do we keep track of quality? How do we keep track of successful project execution? A monthly meeting where your corporate quality officer is meeting with all your senior executives to talk about their observations and findings from internal quality audits, external quality audits, and all the other measurements that are available to him at that corporate spot is really useful to make sure that each of those senior executives hears about where we have issues, where we need to focus, and they go down through their business groups to make sure that message gets passed down.
Yeah, let me throw in an observation here just from listening to this discussion. I think it's kind of interesting in responding to one of the questions that came up too. And we started this discussion talking mostly about financial performance. I showed some graphs about financial performance. And now, these guys are passionate about quality. And so I think the observation here is one that I've seen a lot, and that is that people who think that there's a dichotomy or a conflict between quality and financial performance are missing the boat. Not only is there not a conflict, both of those things are outcomes of good project management. And if you do good project management, you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. You get both.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And I think that might be a perfect segue into another question that's coming in, which we were going to get into anyway, is, we're talking about KPIs for quality, and Dave, your point is just the perfect transition for this. One of the questions, how do you measure, the age-old thing that everybody wants to understand is the ROI. And what are the financial metrics, and what's been the kind of ROI on these programs, both the Academy at Gannett Fleming and Jim, your program? How do you measure the ROI, and what's it looked like? I suspect this is going to be one of those things, or even the 2,500 person engineering firm and the 80 person architecture firm, there's probably not a lot of daylight. You guys look at the same stuff, but maybe I'm wrong. Jim, maybe tell us a little bit first about ROI and what you look at and how it's looked.
Yeah, it's a good question. And, we look at a lot of different metrics really to determine how well, some of these policies and procedures that we're putting in place are adding to our bottom line. And I can say, without hesitation that as we've gotten more sophisticated in our project management processes, and we've gotten more sophisticated in our quality control processes, that our bottom line is improved. It's just that simple. How much it's improved, I'd have to, probably go back and do some studying, but I think it's made a difference in our multiplier, by, probably a good 20%, at least. And, we also kind of measure it just based on the feedback that we get. Our clients are not shy about telling us what works and what doesn't work with respect to, the quality of our documentation and how we're managing projects. And that's always a good indicator for us, when we get feedback from our clients on that. So, at the end of the day, it's about maximizing the profits on the project, and all of these things that we're doing. And I don't think you can point at one single tool or practice or procedure that we do and say that that's more effective than anything else. I think you have to take them all together. And as Dave mentioned, you can't separate quality from the finances. They are both codependent on each other. and they have a big impact on each other as well.
Sure. Art, how about you?
Let me tell you, I'll tell you that I recently put together a presentation about the effectiveness and the return on investment of our Project Management Academy. So I can share with you that David and I worked up an estimate of what we think Gannett Plumbing spent so far on this. And I'm sure this is an underestimate, but we're estimating at least $5 million invested in this program up to this point. What are some of the returns? And recognizing, of course, that there's a difference between correlation and causation, right? But at the very least, there's a correlation. We measure knowledge about project management at the beginning of each of these academies by asking the attendees to take a test, an assessment, and then we do it again at the end, and we see continuous. It's always been the case that from the beginning of the program to the end, they demonstrate that their knowledge of project management is increased. Now, that only does you any good when they start applying what they've learned, but at least that's a starting point, right? So we know that they're learning in these programs. David showed a graph when he was talking at the beginning that showed that net revenue deficit, which was very large a long time ago, decreasing and eventually lately crossing over and becoming a net revenue surplus, I think was for the median firm. And I can tell you that Gannett Fleming's graph of achieved multiplier against what our goal multipliers were looks exactly the same. Back in 2012, we were not achieving our goal net labor multipliers. And in the last couple of years, that gap has slowly closed, and we've actually surpassed over the last couple of years, and meaning we're achieving higher multipliers than our goals. So that is definitely measurable. And we also have looked and been plotting WIP and AR and overall day sales outstanding, and we see a definite decline, continuous decline in all of those metrics that we hope is going to continue. We established customer satisfaction as a goal, and we have had nothing but increasing levels of customer satisfaction against our surveys that we sent out, and we've achieved our overall performance goals. We've increased them over time because we were always achieving them, and we continue to achieve them. So we know we're satisfying our clients. And I think probably the biggest one has to do with something I shared earlier, which is one of our quality objectives is to close every project with less than $5,000 negative variance and less than 1% negative variance. And we've tracked that every year. And, this is on closed projects, right? The dust has settled. It's like an autopsy. There's no more money coming back on these projects. And since 2014 is, with the data that I had recently, if you look at the amount of negative labor variance on those closed projects on a year by year basis, it's about $5 million a year. Averages about that. It goes up and down. And it's basically flatline 2014 through 2021, 2020 actually, same path this year. But our revenues have doubled in that, more than doubled in that period of time. So, if you look at that net revenue deficit, as they would call it, against revenue, it's a much, much, much smaller portion. And, it actually puts money on the bottom line. So, is that causal? The fact that we've been putting so much effort into project management training, I certainly think it is. Even if it was only responsible for half of the improvement that we've seen in our financial performance, we would have paid for this program just in the last year or two. So we think there's no question that there's a measurable return on this investment in terms of dollars and cents, as well as in client satisfaction and quality.
Okay. Another question. We're getting all these questions coming in from the audience, which are just fantastic and tie into our discussion here. It's sort of a compound question, but if you were to do, you guys are both obviously, leading edge, and as we've discussed, I've been doing this stuff for a while. if you were to do one thing to start the ball rolling with more formalized quality and financial performance reviews, what would it be? Maybe Jim first and then Art.
One thing. Well, I think it would be very similar to what we did. You know, I mean, if I go back 25 years of what we were doing or not doing at the time, that made the biggest difference is that we finally just recognized the need for some formalized training for project managers. You know, prior to that time, we were all just sort of teaching each other, sharing information back and forth, and it was a very serendipitous process. And you know, while you know that had some value to it, it certainly wasn't bringing us the value that you know, making a definitive commitment to start a formal training process. And ours obviously is very different from Art's, just because of the size of the firm and so forth. And we kind of stumbled our way through it, quite frankly. But I think that initial commitment and just the recognition that you're not doing things well, and the recognition that you need that kind of formal training is, I think, the very first step. To think that you can manage this process and manage project managers and teach them without some kind of formalized training, I think is just kind of a naive approach. I think you've got to make the commitment to some kind of formalized training, whatever that is. And I think you start seeing measurable results, you know, as soon as you start that.
Art, how about you?
I certainly, that is true. Commitment to formalizing the program is important. I think that focus is important. I think that senior leadership of the firm, regardless of size, has to decide that we need to improve our project outcomes in every way. And they have to decide it's the most important thing that the firm can work on, maybe over the next year or 2 years or something, but you've got to prioritize. We all have so many things that we want to accomplish or have to respond to. And I think making this a top priority and focusing on improving project management and having that commitment from leadership is important. And I think in order to make sure it actually happens, somebody has to be accountable for it, right? I think applying or one senior leader from any given firm should have the responsibility and accountability to the others to make project management improvement happen and to take ownership of that and lead it.
Yeah, you know, Art, you hit on a very important question that just came in, and this is something that we see a lot as well here at PSMJ. The question was, is there a separate kind of principal in charge level of training as well? But it gets to the issue of commitment that you just touched on. I mean, project management training doesn't happen in a bubble without that senior level, principal level commitment and buy-in. Let's just touch on that real quick. Art, how did you get that senior level principal buy-in? And then Jim, I'd like to hear from you on that as well.
Well, I can tell you, I was the corporate quality officer at the time that we, as I mentioned, I was looking for, a new project management program. And the senior commitment came from the fact that my boss, the CEO, pulled me into his office and said, we need a better project management outcomes. What are we going to do about it? So, you know, I became the senior leader who was charged with grabbing the reins and running with this and getting something set up. So, whether that was a board of directors decision that was passed down through the CEO and chairman to me, or if that was from his desk to my desk and putting it on my back, that's how it happened. Somebody made a commitment and made a decision and gave me the responsibility of implementing it. And here we are.
Yeah. Jim, how about you?
Very similar story. There's no shortage of commitment among our senior leadership on this issue. There really never has been. That hasn't been a challenge for us, trying to make sure that we have buy-in from the senior partners and leadership of the company. You know, we developed that buy-in. I developed that buy-in as a project manager, 25 years ago, or whenever that was. And very similar with the people around me today. They all kind of drank the Kool-Aid at a very early stage in their career. And so it's been a part of our chemistry since that time. So we don't have any trouble setting an expectation. We have trouble in terms of divisions of responsibilities and how that happens. We're a much smaller organization, so we're all wearing a lot of different hats. I may be doing business development, I may be doing strategic planning, I may be doing project delivery coordination at any given time. And so, one of the things that we've done is we started to put a focus on bringing certain individuals into the company, which Art probably already has, but people that can dedicate their time and their commitment to addressing some of these issues, whether it's a quality issue or whether it's a financial issue. Previously, we had a retiring partner last year who managed our finances, but he was an architect, so he was wearing a lot of hats and doing a lot of different things. Upon his retirement, we made the decision to bring in a director of finance who's, not an architect, not an engineer. He's purely got a finance and accounting background. And so that's made a big difference just in our dialogue that we have with each other. Plus his time spent on those issues is much more focused. And so we're continuing to do that. I mentioned the quality control director, and we're now looking for an opportunity possibly to put somebody into more of a director of operations role that starts to have some of this oversight and authority over the project management processes that we utilize. Up to this point, it's been kind of a shared responsibility among the leadership. So that's kind of how it's been, working in a little bit smaller firm.
Sure. So a few other tactical questions that are coming in here. I know we don't have too much time left, but I think these are important as folks start to understand what a project management improvement program looks like and how you go about it. Number one, and Dave, you might have some interesting perspective on this too from your experience. Did all project managers go into this training kind of regardless? Is it a phased approach or is it a subset of project managers? How do firms go about choosing who goes through this program? Maybe Jim and then Art and Dave, feel free to chime in as well.
And also let's, what you guys might also answer another question that came out, I thought that was good. And Art particularly, I know you have experience with this. And the question was, what's the difference between the training that you guys are doing versus PMP training?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for us, we made a decision that all project managers would go through the training. And we've started, of course, we went through this in a couple of different cycles over the last 25 years. But most recently, just because we're much larger now than we were, and we've also got some new project managers that have been with us now for just a few years that have not gone through that training. We just completed this past summer, about 50% of our, maybe a little more than 50% of our project managers have gone through the training. And we've got another phase of that's going to happen next quarter. And at that time, that will complete everybody in our office in terms of their PM or assistant PM. We have a few that are kind of moving up the ladder a little bit in that respect. And so they're going to be included in that also. And what we've also done is, I mentioned we have a studio directors meeting and with all the various studios that we have. We've also asked each of those project managers that have recently come back from the PM training to spend some time in those studio meetings once a week, kind of downloading the information that they've gone through and some of the things that they've learned, particularly to some of the project architects, senior project architects who perhaps have not been through that, because that's the other thing that we're doing differently is we're not just addressing this at a PM level. We're beginning to bring in some of the project architects and senior project architects that have a passion for wanting to roll up into management. Now, some don't. Some want to stay on the boards and just continue in a more technical track. But those that do, we're bringing them into the project review process. We're asking them to start, putting some of the earned value tables together. And so the PM and the assistant PM or senior project architects are having a very different relationship today than what they would have had, 5 years ago, because we do think that there's, it's easier to bring somebody into the project management training that at least has had a sense of what that is and what those priorities are.
And Jim, did you consider any of the general kind of PMP, PMI stuff, and how does this compare, or did you not even evaluate that?
No, we didn't. We just kind of, and maybe we should have, but this seemed to be the best course for us, was just to jump into the project manager boot camp. It was successful the first couple of times that we went through that, and so we didn't really feel like there was a need to do that. We may do that in the future, but for now, I think just getting that sort of basic boot camp understanding has been a real boost.
Good. All right, how about you on kind of figuring out what PMs go through it and how to compare it to other general PMP type training?
Yeah, we have historically left the decision about which individuals are enrolled in the Project Management Academy up to operational leaders. The directors of our corporate business groups present a list of names to us in priority order. And we've got, 6 corporate business groups. So we take the first person off each of those directors' list as the first 6 people in the class, then the next 6 and so forth until the class is full. That's the way we do it. We're lucky to have an in-house learning and development group, which is staffed by learning professionals and our HR, inside our HR department. Those folks are telling me they would recommend approaching it differently. They would recommend approaching it from a career development point of view. Who's ready for it now? It shouldn't necessarily be spread out that way. You can approach it a number of different ways, but that's how we've done it in the past. And regarding PMP, our Project Management Academy and PMI's PMP certification are not mutually exclusive. We have lots of people at Gannett Fleming that are PMPs and have gone through the program. We support that. It is a more generic program. What we get through our Project Management Academy is project management in the AEC industry, and even more specifically, project management at Gannett Fleming within the AEC industry. Everything we're doing would fit inside the PMP, the PMBOK, right, the body of knowledge, but we're being a little more specific to our day-to-day business as opposed to something that a product manager at Johnson & Johnson could relate to as well.
Okay. Gannett Fleming centralized PM department or decentralized down to the business unit level?
Has historically been decentralized. The chief or the corporate quality officer position that I held and that now somebody else holds has been historically the center of that, because as I mentioned before, quality management and project management are intertwined at Gannett Fleming. So the corporate quality officer has been a de facto head of a project management office in Gannett Fleming, but it wasn't formal. Each of the corporate business groups could choose to do things the way they wanted to within the variability or flexibility of our quality management system. We are right now in the process of discussing the possibility of creating a PMO, a central PMO at Gannett Fleming. So it's a really good question. We haven't come down with a decision yet. I think most of the firms our size do have one.
Yeah, for sure. And then a question for both of you. Jim, maybe we'll touch on you first here, that's coming in a few different manifestations. It seems to me, and Christina and Dave chime in too, this is a pretty big cultural shift for the organization. Now, Art, you mentioned the example of the CEO said, we got to do something about project management, and that certainly helps. But, what about the naysayers, the inertia to not want to change? How do you deal with that? Jim, maybe you can chime in a little bit first.
We haven't had a significant amount of pushback at all. In fact, if anything, we've had people come to us and say, hey, when can I start some project manager training? So there's a lot more interest in it than you might think. The trouble that we have had is that we put so much focus on the project manager training that some of the other groups that I mentioned before, some of the project architects, senior project architects who really didn't have a path to project management, didn't want a path to project management, we're starting to say, hey, what about me? What kind of training are you going to make available to us if we're not necessarily looking to, take a more traditional project manager path? And, suddenly that opened our eyes to the reality that, it's not just the project manager that you can look at as being, kind of the focus on how well a project is doing. They've got to partner well with the project architects and the senior project architects that they have in their studio to be able to have a successful project. And our project architects were starting to bring that to our attention. And so we've had to kind of shift our focus a little bit, or at least increase our focus to be able to provide a similar kind of training and a similar kind of approach to growth for that particular career path. So we haven't had people pushing back on the PM training so much. In fact, I can't really recall anybody. Now, each project manager adapts it very differently. They all have different they all work a little bit differently. And we've got left brain, we've got right brain oriented individuals, and so that kind of creates a little bit of challenge sometime. But fortunately we haven't really had any pushback at all from anybody.
Art, how about you on the cultural piece?
Culture's tough, right? It always is. And we don't have pushback on the concept of project management training or our project management academy. We have, as we've been talking about, complete senior level buy-in. We have at the grassroots level project managers and people wanting to get in. It's middle management that often is the inertial body that needs to be overcome. And in many cases, it's how they've, a lot of the middle managers are my age or our age, and they've been in the business for a long time, and they do things the way they do things. And when somebody comes back from Project Management Academy saying, hey, I learned this new thing, this 3-line graph about earned value analysis, and I think it's really great. And if their boss isn't as excited about them having learned it and applying it for the benefit of the execution of the projects and our clients, that's the kind of inertia that I think we have to overcome. We have to get people who've been doing this a long time and aren't necessarily part of the program itself to really embrace the concepts that are coming back into their groups, to add that energy and new ways of doing things and new ways of looking at things. That's where they need help.
So how have you done that, Art?
How have we done that?
Yeah.
I bug people, we push back. One of the things we're doing is for that exact example, earned value analysis, we changed the way that we recognize revenue from based on billings. This was back in 2002. We changed it from, revenue equal to billings to revenue equal percent complete of budget completed, right? And so that's not true earned value analysis, but we are switching now from BST 8 to 10, and in BST 10, there is a full-fledged earned value analysis capability, and it's a requirement now that every project is going to begin using the capabilities of BST 10. So that's one of the ways we're doing it, is making it a requirement, as an example. But that cultural shift is hard to do. It's a lot of communication, and it takes a long time.
Sure.
And demonstrating the benefits. Sorry.
No, that's great. So we just about out of time here, but Dave, anything that surprised you in our discussion here today with Art and Jim? Anything that kind of jumped out at you?
Well, I've been working with these guys for a long time, so not too many surprises. I think we've had these conversations plenty of times before. But again, I just want to come back to an earlier comment about, they're really passionate about quality, and it's not just about the money. It's about delivering projects from a quality perspective all the way around, financially and client satisfaction and quality of drawings and every other way.
Yeah, good. And speaking of, one of the questions was kind of how do you get started? What do you do first? I know Christina and Dave, you have a special offer for attendees here with us today. If you guys want to talk about that a little bit.
Want me to share my screen?
Sure, you bet. There we go. All right, Christina, I'll let you take it away here.
So if you joined us today, we're happy to give you a complimentary project management performance benchmark report that outlines your firm-specific performance compared to your peers. Plus, we can do a discussion with one of PSMJ's consultants to help you map out your next steps here. And if you are interested in learning more about our project management customized performance improvement programs, please reach out to me. Greg will put my email there in the chat. Always happy to help anyone out. We do totally custom programs that range in scope and for all firm sizes.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, so email Christina. I just put it in the chat, ksybert@psmj.com. That will be in the follow-up email that you'll get within 24 hours, which will also include a link to the recording that several of you have asked about, as well as a link to get a CEU for the hour that you have spent with us today if you attended the live broadcast. Art, Jim, Dave, Christina, thanks so much for joining us. Lots of good content here in our discussion today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope you found some value in our discussion. If you have any questions about that report or anything else, feel free to reach out to Christina, ksybert@psmj.com. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
So long. Take care, everyone.
Yes.
Thanks.